Hey, hello, good afternoon. My name is Donald and I'm with Old Salt Marine. This is Damon. He's my partner here at Old Salt Marine in Lakeland, Florida. And we have the pleasure today of repowering this Bentley pontoon boat made in Lexington, South Carolina, from a gas-powered pontoon boat over to Elco's electric outboard pontoon. Damon's gonna walk us through the process, so if you could stay tuned and we'll see how it's done. Elco is the founder of the electric production boat. The company was founded in 1893. This is their 125th year in business. And in 1893, they participated in the Chicago World's Fair with 55 electric-powered boats transporting over 1 million people throughout the days of the fair. Very reliable product, been consistent since 1893, and building the best electric outboard today on the market.
Hello, as Donald mentioned earlier, my name's Damon Combs and I'm with Old Salt Marine. And what makes Elco Electric Motors the global leader is power, reliability, ease of installation, and a complete plug-and-play offering. As with any outboard, before mounting it to the transom, you have to get some holes in it. So what we're going to go through now is finding center on the pontoon boat. Now, to make sure that I have true center there, I'm going to use the chines, which are on the running surface, to ensure that they both meet up 16 3/4. So now, to get us a line, I'm going to use our square, and I'm going to make sure visibly I can see that I'm level with the top here. You don't want it like this. You want it on your mark, level with the top. Now, to ensure that the bottom of our line is center like the top of our line, we're just going to do one more chine check. So I'm going to make my position anywhere on the line, and I'm going to go there. So I'm going to go from my chine to my mark, 1.5 inches. Chine to my mark, 1.5. So now that we know we have a level center line, what we're going to do is move over to the Panther tilt bracket. Elco uses the Panther trim bracket. Now, the reason they use the trim bracket is so you can have control over operating the trim while you're underway. Now, the motors do come factory with a manual tilt and trim for pulling the motor out of the water, just like you see on a lot of other outboards. But we're installing the Panther trim bracket just because we want to be able to trim the motor while we're underway for optimal performance. So now that we have our center line on our transom, we're going to need to find center of the bracket. The bracket's 10 inches, half a 10 is 5. Do the bottom side as well. Half a 10 is 5. Now, the purpose of that is so we can line our center marks of this up with the center marks of our motor. So we're going to find the center of the transom side of our Panther bracket. It's a nice visible color. 10 inches, half of the 10, 5. Same thing on the top side. 10 inches, half of the 10 is 5. Now, the purpose of this is so we can line up these marks with the center mark on our motor pod. Alright, so now that we have our centers marked up, we're going to want a clamp or something to hold the bracket in place on the motor pod. If you have 2 people, you can go ahead and use 2 people just because some boats you don't want to scratch. But being that we're going to use this clamp, I'm going to use a foam just so we don't mess up the boat. I'm going to get my marks. They're going to be close to what I'm trying to do. Clamp it in place. So now I'm going to verify my top mark is on my top line. And my bottom mark, I'll edge over to my center line. Now that I have that, going to want to do is mark my mounting holes. On this bracket there are 6 mounting holes. Okay, now that we have our holes marked, we can remove our Panther bracket carefully. Now that we have our holes marked, you want to verify on the inside that you're not going to drill through and puncture anything on the boat. Looks all clear. You're going to need a 1/2-inch drill bit. And before you start drilling, to ensure that you stay on center, you need a punch and a hammer. Go ahead and make you a little punch to ensure you stay on center. Now when you're drilling the holes, notice that the top of the transom isn't level with the ground. It is actually angled back. So when you drill, you don't want to keep your drill level, you want to angle it to an upward angle slightly. Now, as you probably have noticed, we do have a gas fill here, and as part of our OEM Outfitters program, or Elco's OEM Outfitters program, you can upgrade to all these options or elect to not have these options. A good positive for having the OEM options is for dealers, say some dealers might want to have the boat as universal. So what you could do at that point is remove this and cap it, which I'm going to show you now. Okay, I'm going to use a standard 5/16 nut driver to remove the 5 screws around the fill. Now to cap this off, what we do here at Old Salt Marine is we have PVC board or we have starboard that you can use. So what I'm going to do is fabricate a plate the same size of this circle with the same hole pattern to put the seal back on and just cap it off temporarily. So today what I've elected to use is starboard. I've already cut the piece out. Once the piece is cut out, you simply have to have a template for your holes. Center it up and mark my 5 holes. Once they're marked, grab your drill, appropriate size to the screw, where the screw falls straight through. So I have my bits here. I'm just going to kind of do a visual to ensure that my bit is slightly larger than my screw. Once I know which way it needs to be rotated, I'll put the seal on the back side and install it back over the fill. Now, depending on what piece you use and the thickness of the piece, you may need to find new hardware. That way the screw itself is long enough to contact the threads on the tank. Okay, now that I have my longer screws, this seal here is what seals water from getting in between the template we made and into the tank. Notice there's little rubber seals on the shorter screws that we're not going to use, that we're going to want to pull off and put on our new screws. The reason why I do that is because it's easier to get it to meet up with the tank. Now on a lot of applications when you're mounting a motor, what you'll do is you'll silicone the inside and the outside of the hull. With this pontoon, being that this is just like a tube bracket and it's kind of open at the bottom for water to drain out, there's no point in sealing the holes because water's allowed to be introduced into this because it drains out. Now I'm going to get my 1/2-inch bolts ready. You'll need 6 of them to mount the Panther tilt bracket. On the inside and on the outside with a nylon brass locking. So slide my 6. Okay, now that we have all our bolts through our transom, carefully marry the holes up with the shafts and ensure that you get at least 2 nuts on there so you can let it go without the risk of dropping it. You don't have to tighten them all the way down at first. See, I recommend not to. Just so everything lays flush. Okay, so once we have them all started, next thing to do is tighten them down. Okay, now that we have our Panther tilt bracket installed, what we're going to go ahead and do is take the Elco Electric Outboard and set it onto the bracket and get the correct depth to set the motor. Okay, now that we have the motor set onto the tilt bracket, you'll find that once you go to tighten the handles down to secure the motor on there, there's going to be about an 1.5 inch gap. So you're going to need to find something to fill the void or mount the holes through the Panther plate in the motor. So now that the Elco Electric Outboard is hanging from the Panther bracket, you'll notice that you do have a gap that needs to be filled. With the motor, Elco sends a little block if you're going to do the option of just tightening the front. Okay, now that we have the spacer in place and tightened down, you'll notice that on the front here, there's a spot for a lock. That way, if you elect to have the motor where it's easily removed from the boat, you can feel a little more safe that nobody's going to take it because you have a lock on the mechanism to remove the motor. You'll want to put a little bit of light oil on there. I don't recommend grease because over time grease gets real gummy and sticky and it'll lock the cable up. So a light oil, every few months or so is good maintenance for the steering. Now that I have the steering in, before I go and mount the steering arm from the motor to the cable to allow the motor to turn left and right, I'm just going to remove the cowling to ensure that it doesn't get scratched or damaged during the process. So now, being that with our OEM Outfitters program, we elected to get this motor pre-rigged. So what we're going to have to do is remove the controls that are existing in the boat and get our new Elco Electric Outboard controls ran through. So looking at this setup with the Bentley 200 Cruise, so in this instance with the Bentley pontoon, we're going to visually inspect to see the routing of the cables, and I noticed that we have an aluminum piece riveted through this section. So what we're going to have to do is remove the aluminum piece with a drill bit so we can have access to the cables to run them up to the center console. If you're pulling the head off, don't use the drill to rotate while you're grabbing that. It will cut your fingers. So on this, we have 4 rivets. There are 4 rivets, or if the rivet heads are removed, we should simply be able to remove the plate out of our way. So now I'm going to show you how to install the steering arm onto the motor and onto the steering cable. So looking at our pieces here on our steering arm, it's just like most gas-powered outboard motors. The steering arm is going to configure to the motor and to to the cable like so. So our hardware, okay, so here is the bracket that's going to attach to the motor to allow our steering arm to attach to the bracket. The bolt, we're going to run down through the center hole, thread it into the bracket. The bracket is threaded on both holes. This bracket is not threaded. Use our 9/16. Snug it up. Now we're going to install our second washer on the bottom and our locking nut. I'm going to tighten to the 13 millimeter. Okay, now that we have the bracket attached to the motor, we can attach the steering arm to the bracket. The bolt, a washer, and the spacer. That assembly will go up from the bottom. And you have a nut that locks that assembly together. Use your 13 millimeter, 14 millimeter to tighten the assembly. We're then going to thread the assembly into the front bracket hole. Then we're going to install the locking nut on the top side of the bracket. Tighten with a 14 millimeter. Grab your second washer and your nut, install them on the bottom side of the bracket. 13 millimeter, tighten down. Now that the assembly is together, I'm going to thread that from the bottom side of the bracket upwards. We grab our lock nut and install it on the top side of the bracket to ensure that it doesn't loosen during operation. Now that the steering arm is attached to the bracket that we attached to the motor, now we have to attach the other end to the cable. 2 washers and a nut. Slide 1 washer on. You may need to shift the angle of the motor. Other washer. And nut. Use your 14 millimeter. As I said before, being that we're a part of the OEM program, we ordered this boat universal, so now I'm going to remove a couple items, one being a shift cable and one being the main wiring harness that would go to your gasoline outboards. And the reason we're going to remove one control cable from the existing stuff that we have is because there's no transmission in the Elco Electric outboards. So the second cable isn't required. Neutral would be in center. One way is forward, the other way is reverse. Okay, so now before I go to remove my controls, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit more room in here. So I'm going to remove this seat and this panel just to access things easy. Now I'm going to remove this panel from the console so I can access it. So now that I can access under here a lot easier, I'm going to ensure that there's no zip ties holding anything to the boat side that I'm about to pull out. So now that I'm positive that nothing's holding those control cables to other things up under the boat, I can go ahead and remove the cover. And this is a Honda control box. So the Elco motor, the controls are going to be controlled with the Honda control box universally, as with any other gas outboard motor. So now that we got the cover off, you can tell that it's through bolted. So I'm going to pull the panel in hopes that I might be able to access the back side from up here. Okay, so now that I can access the back, I might be able to actually get my hands on the nuts. Remove the mounting hardware. Now that we've got it unmounted, we can carefully pull the control box. And if you have to, get something to put between here because you don't want to scratch the gel coat. So now I'm going to remove this half of the mounting bracket. And the back cover. To access the control side of the control cables. And we're going to remove our C-clips carefully. So this cable here for a gas-powered outboard, the first one in sequence is going to be the throttle. This is the one that we're going to be removing from the boat. So we're going to shift it. This was our throttle, and the cable that we need to keep is the shift cable on the control box, which is what's still in there. However, I'm going to go ahead and remove this second cable because I have a shorter 7-foot cable that I'm going to use just to make things a little nicer and neater. Now that I've taken the cables out of the box, we're going to ensure that we keep the cable ends with the control box. Okay, now this is the 7-foot control cable I'm telling you about. So I'm going to attach it in here on the shift side of the control box. So once the control cable is reinstalled or the existing cable is reinstalled, we're going to reinstall the rear plate, the bracket, the control box, and the cover. What I'm going to do here, this is the power trim and tilt for the gas motor. We're going to disconnect that because with our Panther tilt bracket, it's going to have its own remote to run up here, and we'll find a good location to install that. Main harness, this is all the plug and play options. Plug and play for the kill switch that we're about to install, and terminals for the key switch that we're about to install, and the terminal for the shift lever that we installed under the console. So now that I'm ready to put my key switch in, the terminals that we're going to use is the black one is going to go to the B terminal, and the red one is going to go to the I terminal. Control your depth depending on the thickness of material you're going through. And the key switch is notched, as well as the panel notched. So the notch is going to go with the notch. Install the key switch. And I need a little bit more depth there. Adjust it. Tighten it up. Install dust cover. Kill lanyard. It's all plug and play with the kill lanyard. So it's just a simple install. Tighten that. Once you verify that it's tight, you may need a set of pliers or so. Make sure you don't mar the surface of the plastic and reinstall the panel. Okay, now in this instance, in this boat, we have a fuel gauge. What we're going to do is remove the fuel gauge and install the Victron Energy Blue Power monitor. This is going to monitor your battery power, your battery life, and your expected battery output remaining. Now that we have our wiring harness through the boat, it's as simple as connecting it to the engine. Get the right rotation, wiggle together, turn and lock. So now what we have left to do is get power to the engine. So with our power harness here, Elco supplies a nice fuse there for you. We're going to run up to our battery source, and then it's a simple plug and play with the motor. So here we have our 4 batteries. Each one has about 165 amp hours. We have a strap through the center to strap the batteries down. All the rigging went in nice. And the next compartment over is where we elected to put our 4-bank battery charger with our through inlet plug. That way it makes it nice for the customer, real simple, not have to take the cushion out, simply plug his extension cord into the outlet to charge his batteries. First I'd like to go over this Honda control box. We integrated the throttle lever with this box with a mechanical cable. So during the shift range, you're starting to get power through the entire shift range. The throttle range doesn't do anything for you. The shifting range is throttle. Neutral. Other direction. Starts to throttle. To the detent, full power. Neutral. Alright. So the throttle arm inside of the control box, moving either which way, is your full range of motion and your neutral. Victron Energy battery monitor monitors voltage, current, consumed amp hours, time remaining, and many other things.
Hello, this is Donald from Old Salt Marine again. Thank you very much for tuning in, watching the installation of the Elco Outboard being installed on the Bentley pontoon boat. To learn more about Bentley pontoon boats, please visit www.encoreboatbuilders.com. To learn more about the Elco Outboard, please visit www.elcomotoryachts.com. And to learn more about Old Salt Marine, please visit www.oldsaltmarine.com. We're located in Lakeland, Florida. We would entertain any question you have and would love to help you at any time through the installation of your Elco outboard. Have a great day.